So what I find so fascinating, Julie, is, you're a physician. I feel like when you go into med school in that route, you're kind of taught to minimize risk. But looking at this other side of your life, this entrepreneurial side of your life, you've really talked about how you've embraced ambiguity and had to be comfortable in the unknown. So I'm curious, looking at your younger self, what do you wish you knew when it came to taking chances and risks?
It's a really good question. I would tell my younger self that life and choices are not black and white, that risks are an opportunity to learn more about your situation, to learn more about yourself, and that risks can lead to roads that you wouldn't have imagined. So to not see a risk as a be all and end all, which is something that I definitely did. Whenever you see a risk as a physician, especially, you want to minimize it, but there's a lot to be learned and potentially new opportunities available because you took a risk, and even more amazing opportunities that could come from taking what you think is a big risk when maybe it wasn't. So the biggest thing is just to remind yourself that there's still a pathway in or out, however you want to view it, whether you take that risk or not. When you take a risk, there's still ways out of it or new opportunities.
Yeah, it's so funny how you said when you're younger, you really think it's like the end of the world. It's so true. But like when you're younger, if anything, I wish I took more risks. I'm like, what? That's like the perfect time to do it.
You know what they say, youth is wasted on the young. The older you are and the longer you've lived, you realize that things are flexible. And if someone says no, you should see that as a maybe and just keep going after your dream or going after the idea that you have, that the no is just a temporary thing. Take a risk and someone says no or it doesn't work out. I think my younger self would have been like, well, that didn't work out. But we all know that that's not necessarily the case.
It's true. And there's nothing like starting a business to teach you that because you always got to figure out like the way around those no's. It's like inevitable. And it's like the people who can go around it are the ones that make it. So I'm sure that has been a huge
Absolutely.
lesson. And I want to, I'm curious a little bit more about your upbringing. I'm kind of assuming here, but growing up in an immigrant family, it feels like they don't want you to take risks, right? It's all about the stability and, you definitely went down that route. So I'm just curious, can you maybe share a little bit more about your upbringing and maybe how it kind of influenced the decisions you've made in your career?
Absolutely. I mean, my parents came here, immigrated from Korea in the 70s. They grew up in post-war Korea and in a country that was highly unstable and had just been divided north and south. And so when you're an immigrant coming to this country, the thing that you're usually looking for is stability. And in any Asian family, at least when I was growing up, stability was being an engineer, doctor, or a lawyer. There was no other job to be had that would guarantee your success. And my mom would always say to me, you need a graduate degree and no one can take that graduate degree away from you. You need to study and get a graduate degree and get what you would call a professional job, which in her mind as a nurse was to be a doctor. And that was a surefire way to have a stable life and an income for her to be able to brag to her friends about the status of her child. It just, in her world, it just all really made sense. So I grew up in a lovely family with a younger sister and my parents. My dad was actually an entrepreneur. He ran his own dental lab and had the ups and downs of a small business owner, whereas my mom was an ICU nurse with a salaried position. And when I saw the both of them, there were years my dad made good money and there were years he didn't. And then my mom always had a steady paycheck. So growing up with that too, I thought, okay, my mom is saying I should get a degree and land a job somewhere as a physician. That's what I should do. But deep down, I've always been a creative person. I've always been into fashion and beauty. And I don't know where that came from. I think some people are just born. I mean, you hear these stories, other people who are designers and creatives, and it was just in them, right? Like at 3, you're trying on all these outfits and creating things. And that was just part of my DNA, if you will. I always took art classes, played music, and my mom was happy to help me with that, but she also really needed me to go to medical school. So one day, the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandise comes to my high school. They did their whole presentation, and I was fascinated, and a light bulb went off in my head. And I thought, I would love to do something creative in fashion and beauty. I don't know what that means, merchandising, buying, who knows, but that's where I'm going to go to school. So I tell my mom, and she's like, you're not going to do that. I mean, that's not stable. And what does that mean? And as an immigrant mom, what is she doesn't know either, right? She only knows her world. And in her world in the hospital, the doctor is the ultimate thing to become. So I put that dream aside, went to UCLA undergrad as a physiological sciences major, graduated summa cum laude, went off to UC San Francisco for medical school. And there again, I ran into a wonderful physician who was an HIV specialist, who one day at rounds, we sat around and he asked us, what do you want to do if you didn't do medicine? So we go in a circle, and there's 6 students sitting there, med students. And I said, I would go into fashion. I would do something in fashion, maybe work at a magazine. And his eyes light up and he says, well, my sister is the head designer at Vera Wang. You should give her a call. And I said, give her a call? I'm a medical student. What do you want me to do with that? And he goes, well, I don't know. You don't know where that's going to take you. Just give her a call. Maybe you can do an internship over the summer and scratch that itch. So I call her and she's lovely and says, oh, you must be so smart. You're a doctor. And I would tell you to come and intern with us, but fashion's very, very hard, and things may be done as an intern that you don't agree with, that aren't smart, and you may not be able to handle it, blah, blah, blah. Don't do it. So that was my second brush with wanting to bypass medicine and go into something creative. So that's sort of my background. It's like sort of reluctant physician, although I do love what I do, with this curiosity to be creative.
It's so interesting. And obviously we'll go into your story, but like seeing these little light bulb moments where you're like, oh, fashion, creativity, but then your life kind of still pushed you down the medical path and doctor path. And what I find so interesting is that you actually took, I believe, a year off in med school, which I know I have a lot of doctor friends. You're on that path. That is not a typical thing to do. So you are very atypical when it comes to like, even though you did so well going to UCSF, that's like a top medical school. So tell me more, like, what was the inspiration for you to take a year off, and what was really going on in your life at that time?
You're right. When you go down this path, it's like getting on a train that has one destination and you can't get off that train. I took a year off because I was in love with my boyfriend. And he was going to move to New York. He had just quit his job in finance, and we just met. And a month into dating, he told me, I'm actually moving. I'm in between jobs. I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I said, I'll go with you. And that was really insane because I'm the oldest in our family. I'm the oldest in our entire family. I was always the straight A model child. So when I told my parents, they flipped out. I mean, they just about had a heart attack. They thought it meant I was leaving medicine, but I was in love and I knew I would go back. So, it was a big deal, and it wasn't a big deal, but most people do not take a year off. You're right.
So you end up, major props for you not being like very logical, but like following your heart with your now husband and being in New York and taking time off to explore. And I'm curious, did being and spending time with him kind of open up that entrepreneurial discussion? Like, is that when the idea of the
Absolutely.
brand? Yeah. So I'd love to maybe hear that, because you're out of the day-to-day grind and you're with someone who just quit their job, is also figuring out their life. So I'd love to hear, like, how did that idea for T3 kind of come about?
Yeah. So we barely know each other. We moved to New York together.
That's a big deal.
We didn't live together, but he's the only person I know there, and I'm moving there and stopping my medical school. We end up learning a lot about each other, and he ends up learning a lot about me and my routine. So here I am, a medical student. I ended up doing research that year in ophthalmology and became an ophthalmologist. But I also worked at French Connection, and he thought it was really weird. He's like, you're getting paid for your research, so why are you working at French Connection? I was like, it's my chance to be in fashion. This is, I think I got paid like $9 an hour or something ridiculous. And he just thought it was very interesting how this med student who's supposed to be nerdy and academic was really into fashion, so much so she's willing to work in retail, even though I was well in my 20s, and really into skincare, clothes, really into my hair. I was always getting Japanese straight perms because I have pretty textured, coarse hair, as a lot of Korean women do. And he noticed that I just complain a lot about my hair. And he was in between jobs. I was more relaxed with regards to talking about ideas with him because I was out of the med school setting. So I had, although I was doing research, I just had more time on my hand and we just talked a lot. And the main thing he was wondering and we were talking about was why is it that I'm spending $100, back then it was $100, on a jar of La Mer, and yet I'm still using my 10-year-old Vidal Sassoon dryer that cost
It's
$15.
true.
Not that there was anything wrong with it, but he thought it was strange that I would spend that much money on an ounce of cream. And everything that I was using was like the best of beauty, right? Because I needed like the best of the best cream, the best of the best, whatever, except in hair tools. And so we looked into this space and there was a huge white space for luxury hair tools. That idea didn't exist before we started T3. It was either get a $20 dryer from CVS or a $100 professional, like a Super Solano from Sally's Beauty. Those were your only two options. So that's where we came up with the idea.
I mean, it's so funny you say that because you're right. Before I got on with you, I was telling you I've been using this like old school hot iron and I didn't even realize I've had it for years. Like everything else is so much nicer. And I finally got your, my hairstylist recommended you guys. She was like, bar none, this is my favorite brand. And I was like, why did I not buy this sooner? Like I've been living under a rock for so long. So I can imagine at that
Not the
time.
only one. I mean, you'll switch out your cream in a heartbeat, right? You're like
Yeah.
walking into the department store and some woman tells you about the latest, Augustinus Bader, and you're like, okay, $200, here you are, and you didn't even finish your night cream. Where, but yet your tools are a decade old. So everybody's like that, Yasmin. It's not just you.
It's so interesting.
And
Yeah.
back then there was no innovation in that category. So basically what we did, or my boyfriend did, was he made me a lightweight, highly technical, technologically advanced blow dryer that would dry my hair in half the time and keep it from frizzing. That was the idea. And I told him it needs to be beautiful because it needs to sit right next to my La Mer cream and on my vanity and be seamless with all the other beautiful things I have on my vanity. Back then, and even now, a lot of hair tools look like garage tools, power tools. And as a woman, I needed it to fit into the palm of my hand. I needed it to be lightweight. And I needed it to work. Air is not just air. It turns out air needs to be ion rich. It needs to come out with a certain velocity, a certain volume, and dried in a way that would give you good results. And so that became our passion. When he made me the first dryer, I was gobsmacked. The prototype did dry my hair very, very fast. But more importantly, I left the house without any product in my hair. I used to have to cover it in BioSilk. I don't know if you
Oh
remember
my
that.
God, I remember BioSilk. I lived in that.
10 pumps of BioSilk to like calm
Yeah.
down. But I was in a rush to get to the lab and I was drying my hair and just left. And throughout the day, I looked in the mirror and I thought, my hair is not growing. It normally puffs and grows like Simba over the day, but my hair stayed calm. And I went back and I told Kent, my boyfriend, I was like, I think we're onto something here. This is a really incredible dryer. And he said, let's start a company together.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, so you guys were just kind of doing this for fun. It seems like, did he have a background in hair care? Like, how was the process behind the scenes to come up with that prototype?
So he grew up in the hair world. His parents are hairdressers. So he grew up in the salon and they also did import export. And he just knew a lot about what professional hair tools in the professional hair world, if you will. He knew a lot about it. So he definitely had some connections through there. And then my husband he does have some experience in just product development in Silicon Valley and is just a geek too. He just loves engineering, math. He reads math books for fun. And for him, this was like something to impress his girlfriend, but it was also just, why is there no innovation here? He's always been a tinkerer. And so it wasn't a surprise to me that he, built a dryer with the help, of course, of engineers and the contacts that he had. And the main thing is that it really worked. I mean, my husband thinks very deeply about problems. So we, to this day, are, a problem solution based company, meaning we're not going to make anything unless we know there's a need because there's an issue. And that's how the company started.
I love that. So, you're in New York, you need to eventually go back to medical school. So, what did the company look like? Like, was he taking the lead for X amount of years, like getting it up and going? Like, how in the world were you kind of working through this business when you were still on your route to becoming a doctor and you became a doctor?
Yeah, I mean, the day-to-day business part in terms of finding a factory that would make our products, dealing with packaging and copy and how to message this and market it. I would say the more technical things were led by my husband. But with regards to packaging, messaging, I'm a crazy shopper. I just will buy anything. So I was sort of the perfect customer as well. And so knowing who the target was, which is really someone like myself, I really was more the creative. So all of the visual assets, anything that had to do with visual imagery or copy or messaging, I was really in charge of. And how do we do it? I mean, I just did it. I mean, we were up at nights together trying to figure out how to get in contact with which factory in China and who's gonna be willing to do a small run of dryers because we didn't have the money to buy, you know, I think minimum order was like 2,500 or 5,000 dryers. We just didn't have that money. So we ended up moving our idea or the potential place for production to Korea.
Oh,
Where
okay. And they
we
had
were
smaller
able to,
minimum. You were able to
yes,
find.
smaller minimum and factories that are smaller and not well established that are really looking for some opportunity in the US. And so we found that, he found that. And then, I just found the time. On the weekends, I would do hair shows once our product was up and running.
Fun.
I would be up there with my flat iron or my blow dryer. And the funny thing is as a medical student and future physician, I was very comfortable teaching. And so it was interesting to have stylists around me and I'd have to explain to them why you didn't have a giant volume of high velocity air coming out because they were used to being blasting air. Like just the sheer speed and volume is how they thought drying happens. So I had to re-educate a lot of stylists and say, no, we have this technology called soft air. On the weekends, it was constant. Even now, it's constant where we're talking about T3 outside of my work.
And I'm curious at the time, so you guys, getting the product out there, you were mentioning you were going to trade shows at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And was that difficult because you said you wanted to create a beautiful product and at the time, especially if you're with hairstylists and in the industry, you guys were so early in that. Did people understand what you were trying to create? Like was it well received in the early days?
It was well received because we looked so different.
And what year was this?
Our dryers were so different. 2004 is when we started the company.
Wow.
So back then, even when we were at a hair show, we didn't look like a hair company. We didn't have the big pictures of the models with their hair blowing and like the really large kind of neon graphic. And there was a very much of a hair look, a hair professional look. And we were sort of quiet. You want to talk about quiet luxury. We were playing like, very minimalistic, all white tools, or we had some black and graphite tools back then too. Small details, attention to detail. Our packaging was very minimalistic in an Apple sort of way. And people were just curious because we looked so different. And then they would try our dryers. And then ultimately, it's all about your product. I mean, you can market and look cute all you want, but if your product doesn't work, then your company is not going to get off the ground. And we would just, have stylists try it. And then we're getting traction with celebrity stylists, which is what really ended up setting us apart. We decided to hire beauty PR. So once we got our company off the ground, we knew we had the product we wanted. We had the perfect packaging. The messaging was going to be beauty messaging, not messaging in the sort of traditional hair way, if you will. And then we got beauty PR to reach out to magazines, Vogue, Allure, In Style. And then the smartest thing that this company did was seed celebrity stylists, which back then people really didn't do. And the celebrity stylists like Luke O'Connor, Orlando Pita would use our products and be like, wow, something's going on here. And that's how we ended up in Sephora.
What year was that? Yeah. So you guys were like gaining traction. You hired PR. You have a great product. And then when did the Sephora?
2006.
So 2 years, or yeah, 2 years
One
later.
and a half, 2 years later, um, Sephora comes knocking because they're seeing that we're getting press, beauty press. And so originally they said, hey, we don't have electrical tools, but maybe you can make us an electrical tool for Sephora label. And we're like, that's not what we're in the business. This is a brand, and you have us as, you should take us on. And they were more just starting a conversation. I think at the time Sephora didn't have any electrical tools. So, and electrical tools are bigger. So, they require more shelf space. So they were a little bit hesitant. So they put us in a few doors and our stuff just went flying off the shelves. Like they couldn't keep it in stock. And then we had Ulta come on board, and then department stores, we asked to be put next to skincare. So they wanted to put us next to the toasters and the blenders and the vacuums downstairs. I don't know if you remember, but in department stores, you still have
Yeah.
a section. That's
Yes.
where you find your dryers. And we're like, no, no, no. You're going to put this right next to skincare, and you're going to keep us on the ground floor in beauty. And we got resistance, but they put it there and women were buying it. So the whole idea was we knew we had an amazing product, but we needed to appeal to women with a beauty marketing playbook, something that they're already well familiar with, to take their head out of the space of home appliance. Instead of looking at it as a home appliance, but this is something that I'm using on my head, which is very close to my
You're
face,
so
which is
right.
going to affect my face. Because hair, I would argue, you never say I'm having a bad makeup day. You say you're having a bad hair day, right? So it's something women care immensely about, yet we're not treating it like beauty. And so what we did at T3 was really start the luxury hair tools category, and then open people's minds to spending more money on technologically advanced hair tools. Because at the time, $200 for a hair dryer was crazy. People told us we would be out of business in less than 6 months. Nobody is going to buy a $200 hair dryer, and everyone was wrong. They were absolutely wrong. We couldn't keep them in stock.
Wow. I have so many questions there. Like, as you were getting into retail, so you mentioned like Sephora and different department stores, and it was a higher ticket item at the time. Like, you guys were one of the earliest luxury, or the earliest luxury beauty hair care brands, I would say. But how did you communicate that, like, proposition? Like, would they test the product, or did you just have like the word of mouth and the brand from being in magazines kind of drive that foot traffic in the retail
So
stores?
this was before social, right? So back then, word of mouth was very important. So even if a beauty editor told us, hey, so many people would say this to us, hey, we don't write about hair dryers. Like it was almost like I was asking them to write about a stain remover, a carpet stain remover. They're looking at me like, go to the home magazines. Like, why are you talking to me right now? And I'd be like, will you just try this? I'm just going to leave it right here on your desk. Like, no harm. You don't, if you try it and you don't like it and you don't want to write about it, it's like, I totally get that, but please let me at least gift this to you. And it would, without fail, we would get an email or a call back saying that dryer is incredible. So the product really spoke for itself. So we had editors write about us because, I mean, one of the first articles we got was the $200 hair dryer. Is it worth the splurge? And a rave
Oh, that's
review about
amazing.
how this thing really works. It's expensive, but drying time is being cut in half. My hair feels softer, it's healthier, all of it. And so it was not as hard as you think. When you have a good product idea and you make that product and it turns out it really is something special, it makes your life a lot easier. A lot easier. And so in hair tools, I would argue it's a little bit easier than a lip gloss, for example. If I tell you this is the best lip gloss, it's so subjective, it's hard to know. With us, it was, we tested in labs and stuff, so the results are more concrete.
It seems like you guys were growing quite quickly. Like the first few years, you really were having this innovative product. You guys were growing. Have you maintained being self-funded? Did you guys raise any money to support the growth? Because I do have sometimes founders on here and they're like, Sephora reached out, but like we couldn't afford to like support the growth on the retail front. Like, how was that time frame for you guys?
I mean, my husband had some money saved up, and we're entirely self-funded. We've never taken any money, and we've fortunately our margins were such that we always made money. I mean, we're very lucky. I don't think we even understood that back then, but we never had to raise money. I mean, over the years, of course, we've had people want to invest in our company, but our company is 100% owned by myself and my husband. And it's the reason why we're so razor focused on making the best tools and not now making, bathroom tools and, expanding because we have investors who are breathing down our neck about, we got to grow, 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 expand your range. It's important, especially as a specialist physician, I'm really in my lane. And for T3, it's important to me that we, for 20 years, have really, really been focused on hair tools and tools that are not only beautiful and functional, but that work really, really well. So it's the only reason we've been here for 20 years. It's because our tools speak for themselves and we have customers who are loyal and who continue, and stylists who just sing praises of T3. And it's why we've been able to come this far on our own and not have to take money. But yes, there have been many a night where we've been up wondering how we're going to fulfill an order, but things just happen to work. In the beginning, we did take some small loans from friends that we paid back immediately, but we never gave equity or any stake in our company in the beginning. And yeah, it's been pretty amazing. But that's why we can make the decisions that we make.
Mm-hmm. My gosh, 20 years. That's a long time being in business. And I'm curious, if I read this correctly, majority of the time you were still a full-time practicing physician, right? Did you ever think, like with the business doing well, did you ever consider leaving that earlier on?
I mean, I work 3 days a week, which is not full time. I mean, 5 days a week, physicians who do that, it's amazing. 3 days is still really hard too, because I'm still operating and I see a lot of patients. For me, T3 was a way to use a different side of my brain, if that makes sense. So there's one side that gets tired because I'm thinking about medicine, but then I have this fresh side. So it's not like I'm using that one, it sounds silly, but my brain for both things. It's just, to me, they were very separate.
And
So
you enjoyed that.
and I loved it because remember, I wanted to be a creative person. I've always probably had some entrepreneurial spirit within me, even when I was younger. And I being able to fulfill that and still be a physician for me. My husband always laughs at me. He's like, I don't know how you do it, but I get so much energy from T3. All the critical thinking and the fun and the creativity happens at T3. I love medicine for different reasons, but it's very rote now. I've been a physician for 15 years. It's like, okay, let's talk about your glaucoma. And for me now, is the art of speaking to my patients and helping them understand and helping them feel cared for has become more important than just the physical act of helping someone. So I've learned how to, but it's a different thing than this. Although there have been some crossovers, and the way I am as a physician has helped me in my company. The way in which I communicate to women, to people, has been honed through my physician-patient relationship.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense, because you would never think, like, what are some of the skill sets that are translatable? And you're right, you're speaking with people every single day, communicating what might be going on, like technical things that people can digest. Like that, I know, being in the health and wellness world, I'm like, it's not easy. That's a major skill set
It's
to
a
have.
massive skill set. And I have, in a busy clinic day, I see about 40 to 50 patients. And, half of those people are sometimes new, right? Yes, I have, patients come to me every 4 months, but in 30 seconds, I need to explain their disease, their prognosis, make them feel comfortable, and then have them sign up for a surgery that is not going to be an easy ride in
Oh
30
gosh.
seconds. So if you want to talk about salesmanship, I had a lot of training in that on this side and how to read people, but more importantly, the importance of delivering a real result. None of this is smoke and mirrors. I can't be smoke and mirrors. It has to all be real because they expect a result. And if I don't deliver on that result, they're not coming back. That same idea applies for us at T3. We have to make solid products. It's not just about marketing and messaging, because if that product is not solid, they're not coming back. So for me, the quality of our products and what we say is going to happen is extremely important because it's what I do on my other side of my life as a physician. And it all to me has to be that way because that was my training, if you will. So there is a lot of overlap.
I'm surprised I don't talk to more doctors who are entrepreneurs. I mean, it is nice having your co-founder who's your husband. I believe he's full time. I mean, even though you're still like emotionally working full time, even with your other job. But there it definitely makes sense. A lot of benefits I can see would translate over to, having your own business, which I love. And I'm curious, and, you have been running the business for 20 years. So I feel like we could probably talk about your experience for hours, but are there any pivotal moments that you remember that you would say were maybe the most challenging? It could have been maybe something you were going through personally with maintaining two jobs and a family, or, something that was disastrous in the company that, was impactful, but anything that you remember being, one of the most difficult times for you just as a person.
Well, I can split it up with personal versus professional. So personally, my husband and I really struggled to have children. And being this high capacity person who's a physician, we're running a company, I also thought that I could just crank out kids when I want on my own timeline and everything's just going to be perfect. And I'm going to say, okay, we're going to get pregnant here and this is all going to fall into my schedule. And that just was not the case. I could not get pregnant. We had to have help, um, infertility help. And that made me realize that I, in fact, am not in control. So it was the first time I realized, before you study for an exam, you get an A. You really push for that retailer to take you, and they will. You can hope and pray and push all you want with having a baby, but if your body doesn't want to have one, you're not going to have one. And so I really struggled with that, but it made me have the perspective that you have to learn to let go a little bit, and just roll with what life gives you. And so it really taught me to be patient with myself. I cried a lot.
How long was if you don't mind me asking, like how long was that experience for
It
you?
took me probably, so we started trying when I was 32, 31, and I didn't get pregnant until I was 35. And that was with a lot of help. So those 4 years were sort of a wilderness period for me and learning that I have to roll with things that I don't have control over, which is helpful in business. You don't have control over something happening at the factory and you not being able to deliver, and that you can freak out all you want, but you just have to stop and take a breath and say, okay, so what can we do next? Just, know how to pivot. With regards to fertility, there was no pivoting. You either have a kid or you don't. And fortunately, we ended up having twins. And then 3 years later, we had another child. And so we have three now.
Really? Oh, amazing.
So, but it was a lesson for me that it's not all in your control. You can do your best. But if your best results in something you didn't expect, don't beat yourself up over it because it's out of your hands.
And how did you keep that faith? Because like you said, I mean, the 4 years you're going through this time, it's so hard. You said you cried a lot. And even like you said, in business, you can be going through tough times. So like, what do you think kind of pushed you to keep that faith? I guess in this case, it would be with your children.
I just knew that God wanted me to be a mom, just deep down inside. I have heard that the love that you have for your child is like something you've never experienced before and you don't know what love is. And I just told myself, I just can't believe that this is my story, to not have children. And to think that I wouldn't be able to understand that love, I was just unwilling to accept it. The however is, I wasn't sure if that was in the cards for me, but I was just going to keep trying until I have no eggs left. And then at least I know I tried my best. But for me, I needed to experience that unconditional love of a child that comes from your body. And I knew I needed to experience that. After having gone through 4 years of that, I will tell you, I mean, I'm not a perfect mom and I yell at my kids, yes, but every morning's Christmas morning for me. When I would go to my the crib, open the door, and see my two babies, I was like, the appreciation you have when you struggle for something is unreal. I mean, I was constantly so grateful. So again, there you have it, right? It's like something bad, but there was a reason for it. And it's something I keep telling myself too, whenever something bad happens, even in business or personal, there's a reason and there's a lesson to be learned and a silver lining. And knowing that, I have to push through. I have to push through and see what's on the other side.
It's so true. We've had just on the personal front and business front and just a lot going on with me and my husband this year. And I feel like we just turned the page this month. But I was like, this whole time, I'm like, I try to continue to tell myself, this is happening for me. I might not know yet, but I know just there's a reason for all this. There will be a reason. One day we're going to look back maybe next year and be like, okay, and I'm beginning to see that now. But I love that mind shift change, because when you're in the thick of difficult moments, it's so easy to victimize yourself. And listen, I've had so many cries, so much happen at the same time. I'm like, what is God trying to tell me? But there's a reason for all of it, and we're beginning to see it. And it's just a good reminder to be like, okay, this is happening for me. And in business, it's great to think that way too. And as you know, it's like things always end up working out for what, that reason. So keeping that faith, I think, is so important, and so beautiful that you have 3 little ones. And how old are they now?
So I have 12-year-old boy-girl twins and an 8-year-old boy. And it's incredible. And it is true that the love that you have for your children, and you just learn so much from them too, about yourself, about how imperfect you are.
I
And
know.
again, how you're not in control.
I know.
I was
Well,
not in control of my pregnancy, and it turns out you're not in control of your kids either. So it's just a great lesson all around. I mean, they teach me every day that, I can do what I want, but ultimately, like, they have to live their lives. Turns out I can't control them. So it's why I love taking care of elderly patients as a physician. The more experiences you have like this, the wiser you become, right? And the more resilient you become, and the more roll with it attitude and mentality you have, and the more you realize any situation may not be the be all and end all. There's always a path. And who knows, if I didn't have children, I could have I could have adopted children, and tell you what an amazing life I have now as a mom who was adopted. So, I just really try to stay focused on your specific journey being purposeful and meant to be for you, and have faith in that.
and did you ever compare yourself, whether it was as a doctor or your fertility journey or you running the business? Like, how has your relationship with just comparison shifted, if it ever did?
I stopped comparing myself to other businesses and other people in my own practice a long time ago, because I realized there is no end to that. I mean, you can be better than your colleague or your competing business. There's no there. There's no end goal. And the earlier you realize that, the better. So I always, when I am speaking to people about being an entrepreneur or owning a business, I just tell them, if you're not waking up for a missional purpose, kind of like you, Yasmin, in your business, it's very missional. And I can tell that when you speak about your business. If you're waking up for money, you're going to be okay not waking up one day, because money is not going to move the needle. You have to have a missional purpose. I wake up in the morning because I feel strongly about what I do as a physician and as the co-founder of T3. I know that I am bettering women's lives through the way that they look and feel. And for me, beauty is part of wellness. And I help people with their vision. That's one type of wellness. And I help women with this other type of wellness. It's a spectrum for me. And I'm incredibly passionate about it. So if you're passionate about something, you're going to wake up, and that's good enough. You don't have to compete about how passionate that guy is, how much money that guy's making. It's endless. And I had to stop, because I'm naturally a competitive person. I graduated #1 in my class at UCLA, but I realized it was really the infertility. My friends were having kids. I defriended some of my very close friends because I was jealous that they were having kids. That competition was destroying me. As soon as I found out a friend was pregnant, I just stopped calling them. because I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle that her life was on track and mine wasn't. And as I was losing friends and becoming more miserable, it just, you'd realize you can't compare yourself to other people. Everyone has their own journey. You just have to be happy with what the meaning that you have in your life, may it be personal or career.
Oh, it's so true. And like the earlier you can practice that, the better off you are. And you're right. Everybody has their own journey, right? Like I don't have kids and I have friends who have kids and they're like, but you have this incredible business. Like I'm barely getting started. I can't even do it. Like how lucky that you get to start it before you're busy having little ones, you know? So it's like the grass is always greener and you really don't know the behind the scenes of what someone is going through, whether it's starting their business or how they had their family and their journey. You know, obviously I'm so passionate about sharing real conversations when it comes to women's health and life stages. And because it's all messy behind the scenes. And sometimes you feel like, oh, it's just me, but it's like, it's not. Just a lot of people aren't talking and being so vulnerable like, you know, you are.
I think women also, sometimes we have imposter syndrome. And so we like to put up these faces like, oh, everything's going great. You know, I've my children and my business, and we don't want anyone to see how messy it is. I find that men have no problems with that. Women, it's like for some reason we have to look like we have it all put together. And then we have to like judge other women and make them feel like they don't have it put together. And that saddens me, because, which is why I love your podcast, because you're having women share their stories, and women need to hear these stories, and that community is extremely important. But yes, I think it's even harder as a woman. And then if it does look like you're having it all, then someone's got to hate on you and someone has to make you feel terrible about it. Whereas a guy has it all, high fives all around. Whereas for women, it's like, oh, well, she's neglecting her kids. That's my favorite. Oh, you're a physician. Oh yeah, but your kids, I mean, how many nannies do you have? I'm like, what?
Oh God, I'm not looking forward to that part. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. So, I mean, hopefully, I think we're getting better and better, community of women, but we really need to support each other. And yeah, which is why I'm always listening to podcasts like yours too, because I just find it incredibly inspiring and it motivates me.
No, thank you. And to find the right community around you, right? Like like-minded individuals who are supportive, who understand. Like I've been fighting to find my community for years, and that's like how the podcast started. I was doing dinner, so you don't feel as crazy being this like career-oriented person, whether it's in your business or career. And it's fascinating for me. You know, I don't have kids yet, but I'm always asking like, what does your life look like? And like just seeing how you can kind of manage it all. So yeah, having the right community around you, I'm sure is big, and not caring what people think. My husband's so good at that. I'm like, when we have kids
They're
one day,
great at it.
yeah, he's like, who cares?
I'll be up all night about what some woman said something to me, and I'll be up all night. Kim's like, why are you giving her that power?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't know. It's like, you just met her last week. I'm like, I know, but I want everyone to like me.
I know. I was with a friend, her newborn, and there was this lady that was like, "You're not going to put a jacket on him because it was windy." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe she like said that. It's not even my child." And my husband's like, "You just gotta, who cares?" And I'm just like, I guess you're right, but it's good to exercise that muscle for sure. But no, I love that. And, I'm curious. I know 2022 was, I mean, there's probably so many interesting times, over the past 20 years with the business, but it seems like in 2022, you kind of took another, I don't know if you want to say risk, but hiatus. And I'm just kind of curious, like, what did that look like for you? And again, what was the motivation for that?
It was a huge risk. I was leaving my practice to move abroad.
And
So,
what a dream. And why did you,
dream,
yeah.
yes, but actually, I had really crazy. I worked in a gorgeous practice with an amazing fellow colleague in Century City, and had the best patients. And my patients, by nature of the disease that I treat, called glaucoma, they see me every 4 months. So I get very close to my patients. It's not like I do one surgery, like a cut, and they disappear forever. I stay with them. And I gave notice and said, I am moving to London. And everyone thought I was insane. I mean, people were like, there's probably a line of people who are waiting to take your job, waiting, and you're just going to leave it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to leave it. Honestly, if I didn't take the risk that took before with T3, moving to New York. You know, I don't know if I could have done that, but I also have a husband that's incredibly wise. And he was like, Julie, yes, you can stay in this practice forever. And then when you're on your deathbed, you can tell everyone that you had a great practice. Or you can be on your deathbed and said you made your own rules and did your own thing, and it took you different adventures, and you'll look back and look at the myriad number of experiences you've had. So you choose, like, how do you want to do this? And he was right. I said, well, I've always wanted to live abroad. So I gave notice, and then COVID hit.
Oh, wow.
So I gave notice in 2020 of February, had my retirement party because I was going to live abroad, and then
With your kids, like your whole family.
everybody. We just finished a gorgeous house, you know, in LA, and my kids are at the like one of the most coveted schools, and I was just going to blow that all up and end up in London where I knew nobody. We had zero friends, zero family. People thought we were crazy, and we're just going to take a year off to sit and breathe and ask ourselves, what are our life priorities? Because at the end of the day, T3 is very important to me, as is my career, but nothing comes before family. And so if we could take a year off and go to London and give our children that experience, we're going to do it. So we, of course, COVID hit. So we were grounded for another 2 years and then left in 2022. And it's been incredible. It was incredible. During that time, we were transitioning a new CEO. So the timing was also good in that we were doing a CEO search from London, but we flew people out to meet with us and found an incredible CEO and then moved back just in time for his transition. So the timing was good. And the experience was bar none. I mean, my children got to meet my daughter's best friend is a Singaporean Moroccan French girl who's Muslim. My daughter was never close to a Muslim friend before, and they're best friends. And she got to learn all about her culture and experience what her life is like. And then my son was best friends with a Russian and a Ukrainian refugee. The Ukraine and Russia is at war, and yet here my son is experiencing firsthand that everyone can get along. His best friend's Russian English, and his refugee Ukrainian friend, they all went to school together. The three of them get along swimmingly. So he had to look at what is war. Why can't we all get along? And they had an incredible experience. And then for my husband and I, it's just about balance. How do we balance? We've sometimes talked about, do we take an investor for T3 so we can let go? How do we have balance? Do we sell it? What do we do? But I think we came back with renewed energy for the business. And as we transitioned in this new CEO, decided that I would cut back even further in medicine. So now I'm only 1 day a week and I'm at UCLA, which is less of a load for me because private practice is a little bit harder in terms of management. But now I'm at UCLA for a day, and now I'm fully hands-on with T3 like the earlier days. And it's been, why it's been important, Yasmin, is that 20 years ago, there was no founder story podcast like this, highlighting women in business, highlighting AAPI, women in business, women of color. That did not exist, that narrative. What a luxury for us now, right? Like we've evolved and now we can talk about empowering women and female founders. That story did not exist 20 years ago. We were asked to, not because anyone was being racist, but just take a back seat. Like you keep making your product and we'll send out our PR team, but you don't have to be the face. Now in this new climate of competition from home appliance companies, the beating heart, flesh and blood of our brand needs to be known. And so I've had to come forward and be the original ambassador and sort of cheerleader for our brand, sharing our story because the marketplace has changed and the consumer has changed. The consumer now is much more sophisticated. They want to know the meaning behind a brand. What is your purpose? What is the mission? Who are the people behind this brand? are you being responsible with how you're marketing and how you're resourcing your products? And so because we've evolved in that way, it's become more important for me to come forward and talk about why T3 is so special, why we only make hair tools, why we evolve the best hair tools in the market, why stylists continue to, recommend us over any other brand. These things are important. The story is important. And so I wouldn't have been able to be a female founder sitting in front of someone like yourself answering questions like this 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was a shy 27-year-old who could barely speak. I had a vision in my mind, but now 20 years of one-on-one patient interactions, editor interactions, business interactions have sort of primed me to now be what I am today, sitting in front of you to speak eloquently and coherently about what I stand for. It's 20 years of growing up. So I've come into my own now at 47. I
Ah,
was not like this before. Yes, I did hair shows, but I was very, very shy, very shy. And so I get excited for women, especially who start a business or do something later in life. It's because you are now ready to do that versus a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, 23-year-old. We all mature at different rates, but I would argue it's older women who have that much more to offer to the marketplace because of the wisdom and sort of the growing up that you do. So it's an exciting time for me because I'm doing something I normally never did, being the voice and the face. I was the voice through copy and marketing and messaging, but not in a personal way, not like this.
yeah, but it's so important to, even when they reach out to me, I was like, "Oh, there's a woman behind this brand." Like it makes
Nobody
sense,
knows.
but just yeah, to even meet you and learn more about you, it definitely um, you know, builds affinity to this brand that you've been doing for 20 years. And I love that you said you were shy because I get a lot of people reaching out to me saying, I don't know if I can be an entrepreneur because like I'm shy, I'm introverted. I'm like, I meet so many women on the podcast who are like that. You just have to do the reps. Like it seems like you have done the reps, you put yourself out there, and now it seems like you're quite confident when you speak. Would you say?
Yes, it's practice. It's practicing that muscle of saying your story again and again, getting used to being rejected, getting used to conversations that stop because nobody cares. It's repetition. But I would argue most people can do it. Most women can do it. We're so high capacity and you have to coax your children to do stuff. You have to fight at a PTA board and like make sure that your voice is heard. It's just developing that muscle, and then having the courage to know that you can do it. But it's hard to know that, right, when you're younger.
I love hearing people's answer to this. What do you think most people get wrong when it comes to just entrepreneurship and like starting a business?
One thing I always hear is like, I have this great idea. But great ideas are great, but what's more important is execution and follow through. So it's not as easy as I have this great idea and then everything's going to happen. There's so much blood, sweat, and tears behind your great idea, and how you execute that great idea is the most important part. You can have the best product, but there's still execution and getting there, and how are you going to get it out onto the market. So I would say that also that you'd be surprised at how you can get out of sticky situations just by pure survival instinct. Like if you tell yourself there's no other way out, I'm going to do whatever I can to figure this out. And most likely you will figure it out. So have faith and knowing that there are ways around things, not taking no for an answer, and just having more of a survival instinct, like do or die. I got it. I'm going to make this happen. And then you know what? And then if it doesn't happen, there was a reason, or you can always say you did everything in your power. I would say most people wouldn't even be able to say I did everything in my power, right? There's always more. So if you really care about an idea, you really feel like you have something, just to have a do or die kind of mentality if you're really going to go for it. Because being lukewarm on it is definitely not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, and I think that even goes into like the execution piece because you have to execute day in and day out, and you've been doing it year over year over year over year. And like it doesn't sometimes it's very boring and tough, and you got to just keep things going across the finish line. So it's like that survival mechanism is helping you execute 5 years in, 10 years in, 50. It's very tough in terms of staying course. And I will say like interviewing hundreds of women, like that's a big skill set that they just keep going. And you need that survivalness to continue
You have to.
over 5 years,
Yeah,
10
well,
years,
your
15 years.
company, as you know, your company is your baby.
I know for
So
sure.
if you let go on that gas pedal and you don't execute in the way that you should, then it's going to slow down. Because there's only other thing I learned is there's nobody who cares more about your company than you. And granted, you can't do every last little thing in the company. I can't pack all the orders, even though I can pack it better than someone else would want to. Um, so there is some letting go that you have to do, but in the overall things, you have to be on top of it, and that's the only way you're going to be able to execute. Whatever idea you have is if you're all over it. So that's huge. It's like the good and the bad of being in charge, right?
And I guess my last question, just on that note, is hiring a CEO. There's a lot of letting go there, right? I mean, I'm sure you're still thinking about the business day in and day out, but what has that experience been like bringing in someone to be the CEO of the company?
It's hard. Our last CEO was great, but we were more hands off with him. And he had his own vision for the company that now transitioning a new CEO, we realized was probably not our vision. But it's hard to argue with someone who's very successful, who's continuing to grow our company. You can't, are you going to argue against numbers, right? But with this new CEO, he's amazing. His name's Anish Agarwal. He's very aligned with our vision. For us, this isn't just a product focused company. What we really want it to be is a community of women and stylists who very much believe in hair health and using top notch qualities with specialists. Like a company that focused, like I wouldn't go to a cardiologist for my rash on my skin. I would go to a dermatologist. And for us to be that hair specialist is very important. And to create a community around that, our current CEO is very aligned with that. So we're really excited. I think it's just sort of we're in our 20th year. We're sort of viewing the company. I'm more involved. And we're just seeing it as sort of the next phase, if you will. And we're pretty excited about that. So
Even you speaking, it shows after 20 years, you're still learning and making mistakes and pivoting. So it's just the nature of the game, even doing it after 20 years, which I just love to hear. So, but oh my gosh, Julie, this was so amazing. I'm so glad you're putting your story out there. I learned so much from you. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
for having me. That was a lot of fun. Thanks.